Welcome to the Westside Investors Network, WIN, your community of investing knowledge for growth. This is the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast for real estate professionals by real estate professionals. This show is focused on the next step in your career, investing. Thank you for listening. And please, if you like our content, rate us on your podcast provider. Just a quick disclaimer, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are for educational purposes only and should not be construed as an offer to buy or sell any shares or securities, make or consider any investments, or take any other action. And now, AJ and Chris Shepard. Our guest for today is the CEO and principal of the Stream Group. He is a multifamily real estate investor operating in Columbus, Ohio. And he also used to work as a firefighter for 22 years. Here to discuss how strategic partnerships help the business to grow and their journey of vertical integration, please welcome Seth Teagle. All right, today we've got Seth Teagle on with us. Seth is the CEO and principal of the Stream Group. Seth, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Do you want to start off by just telling us a little bit more about yourself and maybe how you got started in the business?
Yeah, that'd be great. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you guys and to your listeners. Hopefully I can provide some value here and make it worth it. So the Stream Group is a company. We syndicate apartment complexes. We usually do 506B is primarily what we do. And then we're vertically integrated. So it just means that we manage all of the properties for the most part and do all of the construction and renovation to any property we have here in Central Ohio. How I got started in real estate, originally from North Dakota, and moved to Florida in 2000. And I was there for about 8 years. I got into the fire service while I was down there right out of high school and loved it. I did 22 years. I was down there, worked through several large hurricanes, saw lots of death and destruction and all the crazy things that you see on TV that, you know, not all firefighters see that stuff, but we get to see some pretty crazy stuff. And 2008, I got married, or I had met my wife, after seeing those things and experiencing the hurricanes, I said, well, I'm not from here. I really don't want to live down here anymore. I'd rather vacation. So we looked for an alternative on where we wanted to move to. Her dad was living in Central Ohio and she would not go to North Dakota, which was fine by me because it's freezing there. And not a lot of people, I think they move away and never go back. But we moved to Columbus, Ohio, and we've been here since 2008. I was in the fire service up until this year, actually. But in 2012, we had our first child. I had just been working a ton, was getting burned out, was trying to figure out another way for me to create income when I was not at the firehouse, and reconnected with a gentleman I went to college with. When I reconnected with him through social media, I realized he was a multimillionaire, real estate investor, wholesaler, house flipper, had an education program going even back then, teaching people on how to scale and kind of learn his system and program and how he was doing what he was doing. I reached out to him, and he was really my first mentor in real estate and helped me get started. And I worked for a gentleman for about a year here, which again is a short version. And then I went into my first apartment complex, which was a 50 unit, and just grown since then.
Awesome. About how long ago was that?
So 2012, I reconnected with Matt. And then I'd say probably 2012 into 2013, I worked for a gentleman I was managing his flip, so kind of being a project manager, and then managing his rental portfolio of about 20 to 25 doors, and realized through that year I was basically trading my time for experience and kind of getting on the job training. I knew that if I was going to become a real estate investor, or at least get into investing, that my first deal was going to have to be a home run. And I did not have a ton of capital to put up, or what I did, it had to be a winner. And so I took the experience that I learned working with that gentleman and went out and bought the biggest thing that I could afford or find and went from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So 50 units. So starting out at 50 that's pretty ambitious.
I wouldn't advise it for everybody. A lot of lessons learned in that one.
But it sounded like it worked out. So, how did you arrive at, okay, this is the one, this 50 unit apartment complex, and what was the state that it was in? And
really what I got into real estate thinking I needed passive income, or I wanted some kind of secondary means of income. The year that I was kind of had my back against the wall or was in a desperate position, I had worked 1,000 hours of overtime that year, was having a child, or we had a child, my paycheck wasn't stretching as far as it once did, and I made pretty good money, but it just still wasn't keeping up with inflation. It wasn't keeping up with what was going on in my household. And, I was just, well, what do you do? I had worked 6 months that year at the firehouse day and night when it was all said and done. Like at the end of the year, my wife and I kind of like looked back over that year and kind of did an autopsy on like, why are we both crabby and why am I tired all the time? And why am I just kind of a miserable person to be around? And that's what I realized finally was like, man, I work a ton, and, you're not sleeping even when you're at the station, then you got to come home, and I had a baby and I'm not sleeping then. And, just did a lot of things. And so I found, just kind of happened to stumble upon Matt. He really kind of helped guide me in the early years. And then when I worked for Steve for that year, trading time for experience, I realized that flipping houses was another job, and managing property was tough when you were like a one-man band. And he had scattered site rentals. So it was a bunch of, like duplexes. He had an 8-unit, but then everything else was all single family. And I realized during that year that there was no systems. It was very hard to scale the way he was doing it. He had, it wasn't the same flooring in every unit. It wasn't the same paint. It wasn't the same layout. It wasn't, all these different things. And so it ate up a ton of my time trying to figure that out. So I realized I didn't want to do the smaller stuff where, I'd always listened to podcasts back then and said, everybody that was doing, 4 units, 6 units, 8 units, 10 units, whatever it was, they always talked about how much easier it was having more doors under one roof and how you could just scale and systematize it much easier. And I thought, well, I have a career and I'm trying to find something that's going to be complementary to that career. And the only way it's going to be passive is if I go bigger, and then I can have a management company run it, or, do some type of construction renovation. My original plan was that I would do the work. So I had a construction background, was fairly skilled in doing some of the stuff, installing flooring, changing outlets, painting, installing cabinets. Like I could do that stuff. But then I was like, if I really want to make this thing make money, because again, his cash flow monthly wasn't that much on 20 units. I was like, how do I really make an impact or create an impact for my life and for my family? So I said, okay, I got to go bigger. I really dove into apartments and cap rates and understanding net operating income and all the different things that go along with owning commercial real estate. And I thought, man, that really seems like if you execute it correctly, it can be life-changing. So, but the issue I had then is I didn't have the money, right? So I had a great idea, but how do I get into this thing? And the only money that I had was equity in my home. So I did a HELOC on my house. And then I went to another investor that I had met and kind of built a relationship with in a local real estate meetup. And I said, hey man, he was in his 60s. He was kind of like at that, like, I want to retire age. He was living on cash flow, but he had never done a cash out refi on these properties. And I said, what a great opportunity. Like, if you'll do a cash out refi, I'll take out the money I have. I'll run the deal. I'll make sure the thing's a success, but let's go find the biggest thing that we can buy. And, he had just kind of jokingly agreed originally. And then I came back, I was like, well, oh, great. I got somebody on board. Like, how do I do this?
He's 100% in.
Let's see if this guy follows through with it too. Right. It's like,
well, and I didn't even, back then, again, I was so zealous and so excited that somebody would actually like maybe do this with me that I didn't even think that he wouldn't, I've learned now that a lot of people won't, or they say they will, and something changes and then they don't do it. But no, he stood by, he did it. That was the first thing before I even realized what a buying criteria was. I put together things that I had heard from other people say, like, you want central heat and air, but if you can't get central heat and air, you buy a through the wall unit. Don't buy a place that has window units. Don't buy flat roofs, buy this, this age, and look for these things. And with this, like the the sewer pipes and all these different things that like I had never done due diligence, but I had heard other people talk about what they did when they went to these properties. So again, I was fumbling through this thing. Like, I went down there with a notebook, ready to walk 50 units, make some notes, figure out what the plan is. And so I did the HELOC. He did his cash out refi. We had enough money. I kind of figured out what my buy box was, and I took it to as many real estate offices as I could in my area. And in my area, just outside Columbus, Ohio, there aren't like actual brokerage offices where there's some that do commercial real estate, but they don't do apartments. And so anything in my local area, you were finding on the MLS or you were finding it through realtors. And so I just went, again, I typed it up formal, trying to make it look as nice as I could. And I took that to these different real estate offices. And I just said, hey, if you get somebody that's looking at selling something between this unit count and this unit count, call me. And it was not very long after that, I had a lady call me and she said, I got a guy that's looking to sell. It's 50 units. He's owned it for 15 years. He's wanting to put his money into a different project. What do you think? And I was like, well, I kind of did some rudimentary research of the market. And I thought, man, it's not metro city, but the 50% of the population were renters. And I looked at what he was getting for rents, and I went to Rentometer, and I thought, I plugged, again, very basic zip code, 2-bedroom. What is this thing saying I could get for rent? Oh, that looks great. That looks like a lot of upside, $200. And so I just based my pro forma. I mean, it's funny because I remember the bank asking me, well, do you have a pro forma on this? I had no idea what they were talking about, but I had to go research that.
In fact, I do.
Yeah. And quickly put together a spreadsheet. And they're like, well, it's certainly more sophisticated than this, but we'll take it. I was like, sounds great. But like I said, I think the bigger thing, the takeaway on that part is that I believed in myself. I bet on myself. I knew that I'd die before this thing was going to be a loser, or I would lose money on it. But I also signed on the debt. I had, if it would have went bad, I would have went bankrupt. I would have lost everything. And putting myself in that situation, I just was like, there was no option but to be successful. But it did. I mean, it required me I was there every day for a year. When I wasn't at the firehouse, I was there. So I would work a 24-hour shift. I'd get off in the morning, I'd go to the property and I'd work on the property. I realized quickly after we bought it that when you buy a C-class property that's kind of like the Wild West, and you start implementing a true management plan with, direct oversight, a lot of those tenants don't like that and they leave. And so we went from about 95, 96% occupied to 72 in about 2 weeks. And when the first round of money came in, my first payout, I'm expecting to get X, and they gave me Y. And I'm like, what in the heck is happening? It barely cash flowed enough to pay the debt service, to pay the insurance, like the bills. And now we have 20 units open or whatever. I think it was like 12. We had that huge upswing in vacancy. And I'm like, instantly knew that I was bit off more than I could chew. Like, I can't do all the work myself. And so I called a friend who was in Cleveland. He was a firefighter that had left the fire service because of his investing portfolio of buying apartments. And I called him. I'm like, Jack, what do I do? Like, I don't have no idea what I should be doing right now. And he's like, well, you are undercapitalized. I only had $50,000 in the bank, which was clearly not enough because I thought I'd renovate off of cash flow. And then you're not big enough. Like, you've got 12 units that are vacant and you're going to do what, one a month? Like, this is going to be a loser very quickly if you don't figure it out. So I took some of the advice he gave me and hired some contractors and kind of created a crew of guys that between the 6 of us, we renovated 42 units in a year. And then
that's big.
Where did you get the capital?
So that was the other thing, was he was like, you got to raise money. And I'm like, okay, I like, again, this was not a syndication. It was a joint venture. I, at the time, was not very familiar with 506B syndications. I think I was like, I was probably like on YouTube trying to figure out what that even meant back then. And he was like, you got to raise capital. I'm like, well, how do I do that? And he said, you just got to, do you have any friends or family or people that would trust you to invest with you? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's find out. So I, again, that's why I say I don't advise everybody going out and doing this, but I was able to go around to about 5 different people and borrow money from them. They lent to me directly. They didn't take any equity. It was just a balloon note, personal loan, based on my integrity and just them knowing me and for whatever reason, trusting me. And they lent me the money and I raised about $200,000. So, I mean, again, so I had about $250,000 to work with, but, I did a lot of sweat equity on that property along with these other guys that I was paying, but I got paid nothing. And it was great, but I just believed in the fact that, like, I always remember telling my wife that if I could make this, if this was a successful deal, this was going to be life-changing, like debt-free, money in the bank. Like, we could do this again afterwards if it's executed correctly. And that's what happened. I mean, in 14 months, we pulled out $1 million cash, tax-free, paid everybody back. And then the money that we had left over, we went and bought another one. And that was kind of the start of, how we grew to where we're at now.
Tell us a little bit like how you got into syndication. It sounds like this one was kind of a joint venture and some additional capital, but like, at what point did you start doing syndication or getting into that?
Yeah. So it was probably 2015. We were into our second deal at that time. And I'm like, man, I really could see the explosiveness of doing this. I wanted to have as many buckets generating revenue for me, whether it was equity, whether it was cash flow, whatever that looked like, just really trying to create wealth. And it went from me just kind of having a side hustle to, I thought, man, this is a bit like I could really make something of this and not just be a business, but also like it could be life-changing and like legacy changing stuff happening here. And in the second deal, I'm like, man, I don't have any money between the first deal and this deal. My money's tied up. If I want to keep doing this, how do I do that? And so I paid to get around some syndicators that were doing way bigger deals than I was doing, and really just kind of like learned from them, gleaned a ton of experience and knowledge off of them. And then I just started strategically partnering with people. I did 2 deals shortly thereafter my second one that got me into some bigger ones. And then I met my partner, Tim, who's also a firefighter, and that's who's in the stream group with me now. And, his expertise and experience partnered with mine just was like gasoline on a fire. And so we grew really fast after that. And, like I said, strategic partnerships have been really great for us, getting in on deals where maybe the KP or we're the construction group or we're the management group or we're, whatever involved in it on the GP side. And it's helped us to get bigger. And I mean, as you guys know, as you start to kind of scale and you kind of get some lift underneath your wings when you're trying to get into real estate investing, things happen easier, they happen faster. But that initial like getting off the ground is really tough.
Well, I mean, there's some aspect of like, you kind of got to prove yourself. Like you definitely cut your teeth on this 50 unit one. And it's like, all right, well, the proof is in the pudding. And then after that, like you've got this kind of track record. And so you said you paid to get on, like, did you do some mentorship with syndicators or did you invest as an LP? Like kind of what?
No. So I was basically a paid mentorship. And it wasn't like anything big or advertised. It was more of like, like I talked about Jack in Cleveland, I paid him for some of his time to just kind of like, let me come up there, see his properties, walk through some of his stuff, kind of be an open phone call when I needed something, and then I was just learning, figuring out how to do all this. I got around one of the other guys that's a partner with us now on pretty much all of our deals. He's out of Utah. He's got a massive portfolio, learning from him back then when we were kind of just, kind of started off as like a mentor mentee thing. And then it grew into a friendship and then into a partnership that we've done some deals with on a bigger scale. But, I knew I had to get in the same room with people that were doing bigger things and that had already kind of could be my training wheels. And that accelerated our growth exponentially. So rather than me have to go to like a third deal and keep trying to figure this out, I thought, well, let me just cut to the front of the line, pay the right people for their time and learn what they know and learn what their mistakes they've made and how they've done things. And, it's all stuff that I do now for other people as well. And it helped us grow exponentially. So, I mean, it was definitely worth the money.
So Seth, I mean, starting out with a 50 unit deal and then taking this next step, like it seems like you have a pretty, I guess, effective like mindset or frame of mind to just like maximize your progress or just like fast forward or accelerate it. I mean, had you started with a single family home, spending, that first 14 months, like where do you think you would have been if instead of choosing a 50 unit, you chose, to flip a house?
Yeah. I mean, two things would have happened. I either bought the wrong house in the wrong area or, and lost it and be still a fireman, but in a lot of debt or bankrupt. Or, I probably would have stayed in my comfort zone, which is what I find a lot of people when they get into house flipping or whatnot, they kind of get that dialed in and then they don't want to, like the guy that mentored me that I worked with for a year who was flipping houses and had a small rental portfolio. He's still in the same spot that he was when I was with him all those years ago. And I tried to get him to get into bigger deals. I tried to get him to get into apartments. I tried to get him to understand that, flipping houses is a job. The money you make on flipping houses is earned income. You're getting nailed by taxes immediately once you sell. There's so many more benefits to commercial real estate that people don't even realize. And everybody thinks that you have to wholesale, then flip. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh, I should buy and hold. And then they do that for a while. And, now 10 years goes by. And then you finally think you're confident enough that you could get into commercial multifamily or any kind of commercial real estate. And to me, I just saw what other people were doing through podcasts and different things I was listening to and how they were growing their wealth exponentially. And I, like I said, I knew my why I was trying to get into it. And I knew where I wanted to go. And those were two very clear things to me. And I just always kept that in my focus, which for me was my family. I wanted more time. I missed a lot of birthdays, a lot of holidays, a lot of times with my kids. A lot of first steps, first Christmases, all that stuff because I was working. And I've kind of vowed that I would never do that or I would try to work as hard as I could to get away from that. And so, I worked 5 times as hard in the beginning, but now it's, I've been able to get my time back, which was the goal and continues to be the goal.
Well, that's
pretty impressive. Go ahead, AJ.
Oh, I was going to say you brought on a partner in the stream group and whatnot. I mean, can you kind of give us a little bit of overview of like where you've come from those 5 years? Or because you said you were like in 2016, 2017.
Yeah, I think I would say 2015 was probably like it was the start of the syndication process for us, or kind of like looking into that more. Yeah. So, again, I was in my second deal, realized that my capital was tied up. I wanted to keep growing. there was things that I started realizing that I wasn't the best at, right? I mean, underwriting, I'm good at. I prefer the speed my brain works on is back of the napkin stuff. We defined roles. I started kind of figuring things out that I liked doing, things I didn't like doing. When I met Tim, we actually met. He's a firefighter here in Central Ohio as well. He was a lieutenant. I was a lieutenant. We'd been on the same fire scenes together, but we never knew that we both were into real estate. He had been into real estate, but he had been more on the brokering side. He had done a lot of house hacking. He didn't know that's what he was doing back then, but he would, his family would buy a house. They'd live in it. They'd renovate it a little by little. They'd live in it for 2 years. They'd sell it, take the profits, buy another one. And that's what they were doing. And when we met, I mean, he's like one of the smartest guys I've ever been around. And he filled a lot of voids that I had where, I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I want to fall asleep when I start looking into those things. Like I said, I can underwrite and I know what I'm looking at. And the way we have it set up now is, like we always joke that I catch them and he cleans them, where, I talk with the brokers, I look in the markets, I find the original deals. I do they pencil on the back of a napkin or in a short form, kind of like, yeah, this is going to work for us. Then I send it to him and then he digs in. And even now we have another guy that it goes to kind of eliminates some of the initial work for him. But the partnering for me was, a lot of people are scared to partner, but I've always looked at it as like, if it's with the right person, I can go faster sooner than I would if I was by myself. And, him and I identified early on that I had weaknesses where he had strengths and I had strengths where he had weaknesses. That was number one. And I think number two for us was that, ethically we were in line. The way that we conducted business with our integrity, we were in line. Like we just had a lot of things a lot of synergy. And, we both, our families got along. Like it was really kind of a cool thing. And coming from the fire service, it's very like everybody talks about being like brotherhood oriented. And it's not always like that. It's not like what you see on TV. But with him and I, that's kind of how it was. And it was just great. So like I said, once we got together, when my holes were plugged and so were his, it was to the moon. And so, yeah, I mean, now we've got 700, just under 700 doors in Central Ohio. And we're a GP, I don't know, just about 1,150 other doors within the country. And those doors, we don't like run the day-to-day necessarily on, but we've either KP'd and signed on the debt. We've taken some GP as an advisor role or helping people kind of work through their first deal or whatever that is. It's all kind of deal dependent. But without strategic partnerships, I would still be probably, on my third, fourth deal by now. It would have just been a lot slower.
So can you dive a little bit more into how those strategic partnerships came about and I guess how you manifested them?
Yeah. So Tim was obviously local. I kind of talked about him. Some of the other ones of the original ones, there's a group out of Utah that was wanting to get into Columbus. I met one of the GPs through networking, just social media networking. He was in a group and he was like, hey, we're looking in the Columbus, Ohio market. We're looking for some co-GPs or people that are there kind of already doing it. Let's connect. And so we just connected and we started talking and we got along really well. And he had a small team that he was already working with. They had a little bit of traction, but hadn't really done anything real big. And so that was that relationship got me into a 70 unit as one of the primary GPs. And it got me into 180 unit. And those two deals right there alone got me more experience capital raising. It got us big enough now where we could start a management company. So Tim and I decided, again, you don't know what you don't know. I thought it was going to be smart to be like, hey, we got this 180 unit complex and they've got a great staff. Normally I'd fire everybody because they're part of the problem, but these guys are great and they have a lot of experience. When we buy this, why don't we manage it? And then, not only that, let's manage all the other stuff that I have and let's take it back from these third party people that we're doing so. And I'm like, let's go full steam ahead to a management company. And, it took a long time for us to get the right people in the right roles for that to be not in a 12-hour job day or 12 hours a day job, creating that. And then again, that was the original two. And then it got us more credibility. The other, if you look on our website, it's myself, Tim Shaw, Tim Watke. I met Tim Watke through those Utah investors. And we just really built a great friendship. And again, like a brotherhood, the three of us have done, probably 60 million in real estate together. And, Tim Watke was great for Tim Shaw and I because we were operators, we were doing well, but his balance sheet was way bigger than ours. He had a massive portfolio of renovated units, ground up stuff. He'd been in the industry for 20 years, but he had only been in Utah. And so he really wanted to kind of get out, but he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know who to do it with. And so through that relationship that I built with somebody I met on social media, it got me in the room with him. And then we really just hit it off. And, through the three of us now, I mean, we've done probably another 8 deals together, built this pretty big company. It's allowed us to, again, to build out because of the way we scaled. We were able to build a management company that has about 24 employees right now. We hired an asset manager. We've got a construction manager. Because of the size that we were getting, we were starting to have issues with contractors, and having good people do the work, having good people show up, having good people show, we'd have people show up, but then their work was terrible. A lot of things that just continued to be a headache. So again, we thought, well, why don't we just become a construction company as well and bring this in-house? And so, we talked to a lot of other guys that were doing, in the country that were doing what we were doing, and they were bigger than us. They waited till they got to about 1,000 doors before they started thinking it made sense to bring this stuff in. But for us, we were like, how do we, especially talking to investors, like how do we normalize the expenses? If I'm going to go to a property and do due diligence and I'm going to underwrite this thing and then we're going to put it into a pitch deck and I'm going to show it to an investor, how do I really know that my numbers are dialed in, that my CapEx is going to be what it is, and my cost of, my cost for 10,000 feet of LVP flooring is what it is, or the vanities or whatever the item is. Like, how do I really know that? And then we felt like the only way that we could really control that was to bring it in-house. Again, when you do that, it's like a pain point, right? There's a lot of headache that go along with that. But once you can kind of get it figured out and dialed in and get the right people in place, again, the sky can be the limit. So that's what we've worked on since 2015 to now, is building all that out. So,
and then in, today's current marketplace, what's your kind of plan moving forward?
We're still in full buy mode. We're just more picky on what we're buying. We're not necessarily getting the stuff that requires a super heavy lift because we don't want to be exposed to all the risk while we're doing it. We're trying to find stuff that maybe has a little bit more of a management play. But, we're just looking for deals. We have a huge ground up development going on in Central Ohio. I think we're going to be all in for $70 million when it's like, that's the build out hard cost. But the way that with the studies that we've done, they think it'll be worth over 100 plus when we get done. So that's the next big project that we're taking on. But it's, again, like you asked me about strategic partnerships. So I know I'm kind of all over the place with it, but I can go back in my career as an investor. I've since left the fire service, but every person, there's been like if you're plotting out a map, I could go and you see like intersections on your road or different rest stops, or whatever. Like, I can look in my journey from when I started till today, and I can tell you exactly like what relationship led to this, and then that person led to this person, and that person led to these investors, and these investors led to this group of people. And you can trace it back. And I think that's really cool. So partnering with the right people, buying the right deals has been huge for us. And in the current market, we're not afraid to buy. We're still trying to buy right. We've changed our asset class a little bit that we're buying because we just don't want to get stuck holding the bag. If, the interest rates have changed and they've gone up, the cap rates, I don't really feel like have expanded like I think that they will. Yeah. And so it's like some sellers are still holding on to it like it was a year ago. And they still think they can get like a 6 cap for something that probably should be 6.5 or 7. And, just trying to get into the right deals, get into the right markets. That's kind of what our focus is. But, being in Columbus, Ohio, we really don't have to go far because, some of the biggest stuff that's happening in the country is happening right here in our backyard. So we're excited about that.
That's good.
And now here's a word from our sponsor.
Get things done while you're on the move. Learn more about working with a virtual assistant through Offsite Professionals. It's a great way to get all the things done that you need to get done. Have freedom in your time and streamline your life by automating your business. Stop spending time on the tasks that you can delegate and start spending more time on your superpower. Call us today at 503-446-3177 or visit our website at offsiteprofessionals.com.
It sounds like, that first one you said was a C class, and I'm assuming you did some value add to make it a B class. The current market there, are you still kind of in that same class, or are you buying more like B minus and making it B plus?
Yeah. So we're looking more now for like the B minus, something that's in maybe like I said, doesn't need, we just looked at one that we may or may not do that. It's going to need $1 million in CapEx. $1 million it sounds like a big number, but when you're talking the inflated cost of construction and labor, $1 million doesn't go far anymore. So it just depends. But yeah, that's what we're kind of looking for. Instead of like buying anything that makes sense, that has a huge, that was one thing that I learned, is that when we look at it on paper, the upside might be $5 million. But if it takes me 10,000 man hours to get to that $5 million, and I break that down, what was my hourly rate actually worth? And it may not be worth it. So that's, we're looking at stuff now where it's like a little bit less of a headache. the upside might be less, but the headache to get to that upside or the risk is a lot less as well. So, we're not buying A class, or we're not buying something with a 4% return or anything like that, but we're weeding through a lot of bad deals or bad options to try to find some diamonds in the rough.
So, Seth, I'm going to jump back to the strategic partnerships. So, kind of from what I've heard you say is that you've been extremely successful with these partnerships, and it's been able to help you fast forward your career. What do you think is the reason why it's been so successful for you? We've talked with multiple people who have really struggled in partnerships or chose the wrong partners. And, what do you think has worked for you?
No, luck. I don't know if I could put my finger on any one thing. We've had plenty of partnerships go bad. For instance, we hired a contractor we thought was going to be great. We thought he was going to be a great kind of partner to help us build out the construction piece. And he completely imploded. We lost a bunch of money with him. And then we went from him to a class A construction guy who, man, had the beautiful office, beautiful vehicles. Just looked great. And he ended up couldn't perform either. And we lost about $60,000 of that guy who basically embezzled it and then went bankrupt. So, it's not always partnerships that are great, but as far as I think for me, it's guys that have a track record, it's getting to know people. My partner, one of the sayings he will say is we got to date somebody before we get married, because I can be fast. So this guy's awesome. Let's do this, or this property looks great. I get excited about things and I'm always pushing and I'm always, looking at the glass half full. And he's not looking at it half empty, but that's, again, part of my strength, but also weakness, where he likes to pull me back and be hold on a second. Before we just go charging in there and thinking it's great or that this person's great, let's really kind of do some due diligence. Let's do some, investigating. Let's really kind of look and see who they are. And, some of the folks that you've talked to before that ran into some problems, maybe had they done that, not just taken somebody at their word, that it could have been avoided. I don't know. It's hard to know, right? You go to a conference, let's say, and you meet somebody and you think, man, this guy's great. And you get excited because you just met somebody and you're thinking, man, I could really move forward. And, and you give them the benefit of the doubt, but you never actually do any research. And then you come to find out that guy's had 2 or 3 partners that he's screwed out of money, or he hasn't paid back, or they've had really, bad things come up. And had you just looked at, for us, we look at the clerk of courts and you can see if there's any pending litigation or if there's ever been anything that's filed against them. We've had a couple of people like that where they sounded great. They knew what to say. They knew how to act. And then we go kind of do some research and some kind of background checking on them and find out that, we're 4th in line to get hosed by them. And that's helped, so some of those things. And then, like I said, it's just kind of like Tim Waukee, for instance, I was on the phone with him through other deals for almost a year before we said, hey, why don't you come on board and really let's see where we can take this thing, let's not limit ourselves or put a glass ceiling on it. If we think we can get to $1 billion, let's go. And he's been great, and again, it's the thing I love about apartment syndications is it can be a deal by deal basis. So if you get into a deal with a group and you're kind of co-GPing with them and you find out 2 years in or a year in or 2 days after you close that they're not holding up their end of the bargain, or they're not what they thought, you thought they were, you learn, and then you don't do another deal with them. I think the most impactful ones are the ones that you're actually bringing in, giving them equity ownership in your LLC. Those are real ingrained business partners. And those ones I think you really need to know for a long time or vet or, be more leery of, but
yeah. So
that's the concept of dating before you get married a little bit, right?
Yeah,
draw out that period and after there's been a significant amount of performance, and it's all right, that sounds good.
Yep. And we got, like I said, the really good contractor, we got burned. I thought he was great, and all the things he presented to us were phenomenal. And I pushed for us to get in a contract with him, and we did. And then when he was in it for about 3 months and then just dropped off. And wasn't getting units turned nearly as fast as he said he would. And then all kinds of things. And then he wanted to hold us to this contract and threatening to sue. It just became really messy. And so again, for me, a life lesson is, I was very diligent on a partner that I was going to give equity to, like Tim and I. But a guy like that, I could, again, as much as I'm we can trust him. Look at all these cool TV screens he's got all over the place and all this data he's showing us. And he's got a staff of 30 people in here. And man, they're just crushing it and all these different things. And then it just ended up being a farce, in the end.
Yeah. So I guess the other piece that I'm kind of seeing, is that you've been able to develop strategic partnerships with partners that are like way ahead of you, like with is it Tim from Utah,
Yeah.
had a huge portfolio and are able to kind of create those relationships that actually like fast forward you as well. How do you think that you've been able to develop those? And like that seems like a really significant like piece of your success and your strategy.
I mean, it's definitely helped. And I think that like for us is we're just real, like we're real operators. We're real guys doing it. We're not going out and putting stuff under contract and then closing and then giving it to a third-party management company and not really knowing how to do it. I mean, we've been in the trenches, and I think he saw that and respected that and gets that. And, he had not syndicated anything when I met him. So a lot of his wealth was created through appreciation of that market. He bought a lot of stuff a long time ago, built a lot of stuff that really helped push him to a level where I was jokingly telling him he's the king of the mountain, but he wanted to get out of his local area, continue to create wealth, but he really didn't know like how to do it, who to do it with, and I don't know. I mean, I think that he saw that in us. We'll give him the news straight the way it is, whether he wants to hear it or not. And I think he respected that, and there's deals that we looked at where he was like, man, this looks great. And then we would really dig in and find problems with it, or, because I think that just the way we operate, I don't know. And that's all I can say, is that's how we operate. And that's how I think that he really liked that. And he felt like he could trust it. And we're 2 years into multiple deals together, and, we're going out there. He's coming to my house. We're going out to Utah to do some investor relations and meet with some folks. And, we'll do stuff with him when we're there and be all together. And I don't know. I mean, you meet people in life that you just click with, and it just works. So like I said, probably, lucky, blessed. I don't know, with beyond the other things.
I'm going to kind of change gears here. I mean, it sounds like you've kind of created alternate streams of income with these, creating the property management and the construction, and it sounds like you went from no employees to quite a few employees, like fairly quickly. Like, how has that kind of like learning curve been? And like, what have you done to really kind of maximize or optimize it?
It's been a challenge. I'll put it that way. You know what I mean? Like, I never got into real estate investing thinking I'd be an employer. Again, I think that the book, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan, really changed my life. I found that book in my first property. And I think for us, the biggest thing is bringing in the right professionals to help us figure it out, right? We have a great accounting team, and we just brought in an HR group that we spent a bunch of money on to come in to interview all of our employees to find out what they do, how they do it, how much time they spend on it, like all these things. And then really help us build out an org chart and say, look, this is where your holes are, and then help us fill them. I think that I really believe in finding somebody that's doing, whatever my problem is, rather than me try to figure it out. I'll hire the right professional to come in and help us figure it out. And we figure it out a lot faster, then we can get back on track. So like I said, for us, hiring an asset manager, we placed them through the HR company. We just hired another property manager. Some of the other people that we've hired have been, they've kind of gone through those folks, and they really helped bring structure to what we were doing, because for a long time in the beginning, it was Tim and I were working 12-hour days. I wasn't on a property anymore, but I was behind a computer, behind a spreadsheet. I was doing different things, trying to figure out like, how do we keep this thing on the road, grow the portfolio, grow the company, but also do it to where we're still having money in the bank to pay people. And we were only, I think, able to do it because we brought in the right professionals to kind of help guide us. Because again, I will pay the right person whatever they want if they get me to the result that I need. And, I think that that's where we've been successful, is just bringing in the right folks to the who's for our how. Rather than me try to figure out how to do it, I just hire the right person to show me how, and they basically do it for me. So that's the employee side, right? I didn't know anything about BWC insurance and benefits and PTO, and I had no idea, but we went to a great accounting team that does our payroll, the HR group. We brought in great attorneys that do HR and all those things. And like the asset manager, for instance, that we just hired, he's exited successfully 2 property management companies. So as we want to continue to scale our property management company, we want to start offering third-party management to investors, because it's ran by investors for investors is the way I look at it. You buy a value add property, most management companies don't know how to take it from that B- to B+, or that C+ to B. They don't know how to do that. And that's what we specialize in, because that's what we do on our own stuff. And so, how do we get there? So that's why part of why we hired this gentleman was because he's grown 2 management companies from nothing to very large and then exited them. And so that's, again, I don't know how to
That sounds like the right
I could
move.
figure it out, but I don't want to.
Well, it also sounds, I mean, like just hearing the story from your first deal to kind of where you are now is like, you know, if you're able to commit to something, like you've got that mindset that like, no matter what happens, like I'm going to make this work. I think in the industry, they call it grit or some other things. I mean, my brother and I have definitely jumped into some stuff and it's like, you know, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. Like we're going to make it work. That seems to have resonated throughout like what you've been saying throughout today, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I heard something recently. I probably will get it wrong if you guys have heard it before, but there's like 5 cycles of like entrepreneurship where like you get all excited about the opportunity and then you move forward. Then you realize that it's a lot more work than you wanted to do, or that you had no idea what you're kind of getting into. And then you, like a lot of people give up in that stage 3 where like you got to grind it out. You got to dig in. You got to, like you said, you got to have grit. You got to just, put your head down and work and figure out a way, be resourceful to get to the other side. And then they said stage 4 was like kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel, where like you kind of start getting that wind behind your sails and you're like, man, you can really kind of see the vision starting to kind of take place and kind of come, you're kind of coming out of the darkness. And then stage 5 is enjoying it. And I heard I don't remember what video I was watching or listening to a podcast or hearing somebody talk about it, but they explained that. And the way they said it, I'm like, man, that just resonates with me on every aspect, right? Because it was, whether it's you're getting into investing, you do a management company, you start doing construction, like it all sounds great. It all sounds great on paper. And then you actually have to get into it and rubber meets the road kind of situation. And it can be a lot harder than you thought it would be. And a lot of people give up in that, if they just held out another 3 months or 6 months, where would they be at? And I think that's, for us, there's just no going back. I mean, I've left the fire service. I left a 22-year career before I was fully pensionable. I'm too old to get hired anywhere in Ohio. And, it doesn't transfer between states. So I can't go to Indiana or Kentucky or Florida or whatever and go back there and work because my licensing and certificates I have are only good for Ohio. And now in the state, 95% of departments I'm too old for. So when I left. And I think that really put some fire in you too, that, you have no other plan B. You got to succeed.
We were chatting with Whitney Sewell the other day and he had a moment like that. And he said, yep, we sold our farm and, it went full time into real estate investment. And it's just like, whoa, you sold the farm, and AJ mentioned like, I think I want to say it was when either the Pilgrims came but they burned their ships. There was no sailing back. They were going to make it work. And the other thing that came up when you were chatting about that is our dad has a saying and he says, if it was easy, everybody would do it. And, going through those stages of, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then, oh my gosh, this is going to be really hard. And then it is really hard for, that entire stage 3. And then finally, after you do enough of the work to get it to be where okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel here. It's so funny. I mean, for us, almost every single project is like that. It's like, yes, let's buy this property. Oh my gosh, there's so much more stuff than I originally, this is taking way longer.
Yeah.
And, and then it's like, finally it's cash flowing. So.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the stuff that people don't talk about. I mean, a lot of people want to talk about how to buy the deals, find the deals, like all the fun stuff. And that's exciting, the thrill. But then once you get done and you got to talk about the real work, it's just not sexy. As somebody, the way they explain it to me, they're like, nobody really wants to hear about that. I'm like, but that's what you got to talk about because that's where the deal falls apart. I did a thing the other day with somebody where I was talking about how, most investors that invest with us are people that know us or have known us or know of us word of mouth. And they'll tell us hey, the deal sounds great. That apartment complex looks awesome, but I'm investing with you guys because of your track record and your experience. So-and-so invested with you, they had a great experience and I really like that. And that's why they're investing, the return is cool. But again, if you're putting your money in with a group and they don't really have a solid plan. And again, if they don't, for us, we're always like, what's plan A? Great. What's B, C, and D? And we get that, I think, from the fire service because, we had to have 6 plans on every run. When we went out the door in a fire truck and you go to whatever the situation is, you better know 4 different ways on how to fix it or mitigate the issue. And that's kind of how we look at this, is having multiple plans and being able to pivot and, like I said, be resourceful. So, but it's tough. I mean, every deal is different. I don't think we've bought a deal yet where we closed, then we just threw it into neutral and coasted down the hill and this is great. And then we, get to the end and we're like, everything was perfect. We haven't. If there's people out there doing it, I want to know what you're doing, but that's really it. Is I think
all those new developers, they just hire the contractor, magically have the project delivered on time, under budget, and with no work, and then it leases up immediately and they sell it for a boatload of money.
Yeah, we'll see. That's why we were like, when we had this opportunity to come up to develop, we're like, man, that sounds great. Like 20 minutes from the Intel site. We got it before, that was off market, pocket listing from a broker we know. I was like, man, it's right by my house. So I'm like, this would be great. It'll allow us to scale and hire more people. And we'll see. I mean, again, in that situation though, at least you can bring in real companies that have, they're professional companies, but yeah, still you have to manage the budget. Yeah. There's been so much work going into that. We got that in contract at the end of, I want to say maybe the beginning of this year. And we're
still working on the budgets.
We're deep in it. Yeah. We just had a big engineering meeting yesterday and the construction company came back to us with an initial budget and their ground, just the development of moving dirt part of it was double what we originally had projected. And we're like, man, that's no fun. Like, how do we figure this out? And so it's still a lot of brain work, but you're just not dealing with the Craigslist contractors or, some of that kind of stuff. But it's, I don't know. Like I said, I think it's going to be great for us and it'll be definitely a pivotal development in the next 2 or 3 years when we start getting it done and leasing it up. And because it's multifamily, it's condos, it's single family, it's a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, building is slowing down. At least single family home building with interest rates going up, new home starts are way down. And so, multifamily generally lags a little behind that. But I remember a time in 2010, 11, 12, where contractors were desperate to have projects to start. And there was no inflation. Costs were really low. And so obviously I have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but is that something that is kind of in the back of your mind? Like, I recently chatted with a developer who said, yeah, we're booking, normally we're 2 years out to build stuff, but we only have 9 months of projects right now. So we're ready to start, new projects here soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, at least for us, developing has been, I'm by no means a pro at it, right? This is 147 acres. It's 750 units altogether. Again, a mix of multifamily condo houses, but we're in the heartland of where Intel is building. They were originally doing a $20 billion investment. Now they're doing $100 billion. It's going to be 5 of these chip manufacturing plants in Licking County, which is where I live. Our site is 20 minutes from that. They're going to have 3,500 jobs projected right now, which now with 5 plants will be 16,000 jobs just at the factories, not to include all the construction. The original one plant they were going to do they were saying was between 7,000 to 10,000 construction jobs. And then all of the other businesses that have to pop up to supply them. There's already people moving here, like Bayer Paint's moving their major facility in California out here right by where, it's 2 minutes from our site. It's just the landscape of where I live right now is going to look nothing like it does in 10 years.
It's booming. It's almost like a gold rush.
Yeah. And so, the land grab, for instance, on Licking County's auditor site, my partner and I were talking about this yesterday, the auditor has created a completely separate tab for land transfers and deals within Licking County because it's such a land grab right now. People are just trying to buy land so that's what So where we're developing is different than probably anywhere else in the country. I would not want to go and cut my teeth on a development like in Georgia or South Carolina or, Sarasota, Florida, or we've looked in Jacksonville. I would be way more nervous about that. And I'm not saying I'm not nervous about this. Obviously if those things aren't kind of entering your mind, you would be foolish. But I think that for us, the amount of people that are going to be coming here, the amount of shortage that we already have in Central Ohio and the Columbus area is tremendous. It was already that way before this development. And if you just look at where their other plant is at in the country, I believe it's New Mexico. If you look at where that plant was built like 20 years ago and what that one plant did to that area, I mean, it changed it completely. They're going to do 5. I mean, I don't even think that I probably have any idea what this is really going to look like when it's all said and done. But, it's when the Congress passed the CHIPS bill, it was huge. It was already the biggest project that the state of Ohio had ever done was the $20 billion one. And this is now when the federal government got behind it and said, yeah, we're going to give you the money to do the 4 other ones. It's the largest project that I've ever even heard of being done in Ohio and many other states, if not the country. So, that's
Really
what we're like. Yeah, for us, that's why it's exciting, right? And that's why for us too, we're like, we don't really need to venture out into a ton of other markets, because if we can keep buying here locally, we can go deep local versus spreading out all over the place. And 10 years from now, hopefully some of this C-class, tertiary, and secondary market stuff I've bought will be worth, a lot more. And, we'll see.
Yeah. Very, very exciting. Well, I think it's getting to be about that time. We're going to jump into our last 4 questions. AJ, you want to start us off?
Sure. First one is, what is one piece of advice you would give to your 25-year-old self?
I would get into real estate sooner. I'd say that, or get a mentor. I had one person around me when I was 25 that was doing rentals, and I didn't care enough to even really understand. And I wish I would have. If I could go back, I would have said, do whatever you have to get in that guy's ear and learn from what he's doing. So that's probably what, if I could go back, would be getting real estate sooner and get a mentor.
Yeah. Awesome advice. Okay. What was your first entrepreneurial endeavor?
I would say I was always kind of entrepreneurial in spirit. And I didn't realize it. I was doing stuff when I was a kid, and I was doing stuff in high school. But really, I would say the first big one that I did was by myself was the first rental property. That first 50 unit was the first biggest thing. Because like I said, I went into the fire service, and, most guys, you're just mentally and trained to never leave. Good job, good benefits, pay every 2 weeks. You get raises, you got a good schedule. Like most guys, they would never think to leave. And so I kind of, I would say I coasted for quite a while until my life started getting harder to where I had to start looking for something else.
Yeah.
Very cool. Next question is, how has your formal and informal training shaped your journey?
That's a great one. So my formal training has helped me build and has aided me building this business and this company. Both Tim and I, coming from the fire service, we structure all of our, we have SOPs, we have a chain of command, we have, we call it, in the fire service, we call it officer meetings, but we have meetings every month with our management staff or bi-weekly or whatever we need to do. Like we run it like a firehouse. And we run it that way because that's all we've ever known, right? It was paramilitary. It works. We were under that command structure in life and death situations, high stress, all kinds of craziness. So that has really helped me build the business. And then informal, I think that I never would have got into my first deal had I not worked for Steve for a year doing his project management and portfolio renting, portfolio leasing and managing. So, I didn't pay for that. I think that that's the thing is trial by fire. I learned a ton. That would be what I would consider informal. I took that informal, put it on paper. Now I had a resume, experience. That's how I got my first loan. So pretty big.
Cool. Okay. Our final question. What was your biggest mistake and what did you learn?
I would say the biggest mistake that I did was when I went into that first deal, I didn't know what I didn't know. What I didn't know also was to ask, right? I didn't have anybody around me. So I think that if I could go back again and do that over, would be find somebody doing that already. And sometimes it can be hard, but whether you're getting mentored by somebody locally or that's in your area, or it's like your podcast, or it's something else, like having somebody that can kind of be your training wheels or can kind of help you. Because I had Jack, for instance, that I called probably 4 times in that year, but had I not had him, I would not have known what to do. I wouldn't have recognized that I was undercapitalized. I would not have recognized that I needed to go out and raise other, private money. I would not have recognized that, just these different things. And I think that that's that was my biggest mistake, was that I I didn't realize I was even making a mistake at the time, right? You just don't know what you don't know. I think like recognizing that, it's the same thing when somebody flips a house for the first time. They see it on TV, they hear about it, they go buy a house. This sounds great. And then they bought on the wrong side of the street, or the one block over from that hot neighborhood, or they over renovate it and they put in 50,000 when they really should put in 25,000, and now they can't sell it. I mean, all of those things can be avoided with being around the right people. So that's probably it didn't cost me a ton, but luckily, that's probably the biggest mistake that I made, was not looking harder for that right person.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah, thanks, Seth.
Seth, it's been great having you on the show. If our listeners or audience wants to get in touch with you or reach out, what's a good medium, or how should they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media. They can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on TikTok putting out content. And then they can come through the stream groups website. And then we also have Firehouse Bros. TheFirehouseBros.com is our education website where we help other people kind of do what we did. They can reach me through that website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This is
you.
a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate your viewpoints on a lot of the stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on. Give me the opportunity.
Very exciting. Well, we look forward to connecting with you again, and thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Hopefully that was what you guys were looking for.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Professionals Investing Podcast on WIN, your community of investing knowledge for growth. We hope that this episode has increased your knowledge and added value to your path to freedom. If you would, please take a second to rate us so that we can get more great investors to interview. If you or someone that you know wants to be on, please visit westsideinvestors.com and fill out our form to be on the show. Thank you again, and enjoy your day.